It's been a little while since I made a video tutorial, but today I would like to show you the style of MANKEYFOTO. This style has been gaining a lot of traction lately, and the artist MANKEYFOTO has become very famous for this particular style because he practically has his own style, which is really nice. The purpose of this tutorial is honestly not to copy the style of MANKEYFOTO, but really and truly to be able to understand what goes into creating such a beautiful and such a nice looking scene and atmosphere from a generic photo. So let's dive right into it, and today I would like to show you how we can turn this photo of a bird into this shot which resembles the style of MANKEYFOTO. So we can start immediately by cropping the image, and if we consider the style of MANKEYFOTO, it's typically a very prominent animal, normally birds, and usually most of the scene is taken up by that bird in particular. So I'm going to crop my photo immediately to focus on the bird. Something like this should do. So I'm going to go for this particular crop, and I'm going to immediately start by selecting my subject. You can see that Lightroom did a pretty good job at the selection right here, and I'm going to click on these three dots right here and invert this mask. You can see that now we have selected the background of our subject, of the bird in this case, and I'm going to use this selection to reduce texture and clarity completely on that selection. This will give an even smoother looking background. We can even reduce the haze, but this will brighten our background. So I will just reduce it by around -10. Now that we have our background smoothened out, I'm going to do just a few basic adjustments, and that will be changing the temperature and tint of the photo. I'm going to select a yellowish part of the image in order to give it a bluish and green tint. So I'm going to select the white of the orange right here. And as you can see, we've shifted our colors slightly towards the blue side, and then we can play around with the tint to give it that extra tint into the colors that are usually used by MANKEYFOTO. So now in the background and the shadows, you can see that we have this blue greenish color. Now onto a few localized masks. I'm going to immediately create a subject selection, invert that selection. Once again, we already did this, but now I'm going to intersect this selection with a radial gradient. So what I will do here is I will create a radial gradient that doesn't affect my subject, basically something like this. And MANKEYFOTO typically has a brightened part behind the subject itself, and then it fades, sort of a vignette that fades into darkness practically. So I'm going to do a few adjustments here because my background is already too bright. So I'm going to reduce highlights, reduce exposure really slightly, and then I'm going to reduce my blacks and my shadows as well. So now we have already sort of a dimmed down background, but we need to create yet another radial gradient. This time it will be a large radial gradient. And now I'm going to invert this selection. I need to make sure to subtract my subject from this particular selection because it already is affecting parts of my subject. So I'm going to click subtract and select subject, and you can see that it will immediately remove my subject from the selection. Now we can reduce exposure quite drastically, reduce shadows as well, but we also need to reduce highlights and also the whites in this particular area. We can even adjust the temperature and tint a bit more here. Another mask, I'm going to use a linear gradient from the bottom, similar to what I explained before. We can smoothen it out as much as we like, add yet another linear gradient to this selection, and I will create a linear gradient coming from the top right corner, which overlaps onto my subject as well. But I'm going to subtract, so select this mask and subtract my subject once again in order not to affect my subject. This time I'm going to reduce exposure even further, reduce the contrast, which creates an even smoother look, reduce shadows and blacks, and you can see that we have blacks clipping at the bottom right here, but this is not a problem because we will tackle it in the next part of the tutorial. And MANKEYFOTO style is typically made up of shadows which are matted out basically, so it's a smooth looking shadow and faded out practically. So what I will do is I will once again select the latest mask that I made, and I will raise my leftmost part, which is the deep blacks, and then reduce the blacks even further at a point which is close to those blacks. But as you can see, my deep blacks have now turned into grey. We can also apply the same effect on the full image. So we can go to tone curve. On the full image, we can raise the leftmost black point and reduce a bit of shadows close to that black point. We will increase our highlights. And now we have something very close to what MANKEYFOTO does with his photos. What I will do right here is I will go back to the mask where I am selecting just behind my subject, and I will reduce the contrast even here, and maybe even reduce texture and clarity in this part of the photo. As you can see, we've smoothened out even further the background of our subject. And one final thing, I will select my subject, because I have obviously not adjusted anything with my subject yet. I will make sure to balance out the background look by adjusting the temperature and tint of my subject. I can raise exposure just slightly and play around with highlights and shadows of this particular subject. Alright, looks good. I'm going to go back to the color mixer now, and what I would like to do is just to lessen the saturation of this orange right here, just slightly, in order to keep my subject in focus. So whenever someone is looking at this particular photo, the main subject will be the bird. And if you like, you can also intensify the color of the bird to make it even more prominent. And if we compare the before and after of this shot, we can see that we've created the style, a similar style to what MANKEYFOTO uses in his edits. And as I said before, please do not copy a style of another photographer and use it for all your edits, but learning how to do something like this is really interesting, especially when it's gaining so much traction in the photography world. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you for watching as always.